Why do futurists and transhumanists think that eventually humans will be able to upload their minds into computers? It's a concept that has existed in science fiction for many decades, nearly 100 years now. There may have been similar stories of a person swapping bodies with another person or an animal before that, but by a magical means instead of a scientific means. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein story is a kind of a early precursor to the science fiction concept of mind uploading. But it's not quite the same thing. In Frankenstein, a brain is transferred into a different body, not a computer. The concept of uploading a mind into a computer came later. Computers didn't exist yet in Mary Shelley's time. One of the earliest examples of uploading a mind into a computer is from a story named The Infinite Brain, published in a magazine called Science Wonder Stories in 1930. In that story, a man named Anton de Roublé invents a machine that can duplicate the mechanical and electrical processes of the human brain. Later, Roublé has died, but his mind lives on in the machine he built and communicates via typed messages. The concept of human minds in a computer was written about in the 1950s by famous sci-fi writers like Isaac Asimov and Arthur C. Clarke. The concept of mind uploading to a computer or a clone or an android body can be found in the ensuing decades in many other science fiction stories, including the Star Trek franchise, the Stargate franchise, and a show like Altered Carbon on Netflix. Star Trek Picard is one of the most recent examples of this concept. Admiral Jean-Luc Picard has his mind transferred into what is called a positronic brain in Star Trek, which is inside an android body designed to look like his real body. At some point, if you read or watch sci-fi, you've probably come across a story like this. It's really not a novel concept anymore. At this point, it's kind of like flying through space to visit other planets. It's just another common sci-fi trope like that. Now there are some people who think this could become a reality, and not just a sci-fi trope. Elon Musk's Neuralink company is working on a chip to integrate the brain with a computer. It's not intended for uploading consciousness to a computer, but to help disabled people move and communicate again and help restore vision for the visually impaired. But some people might see the creation of a chip that can link a brain to a computer as a precursor to a future technology that can transfer the mind from the brain into a computer. If the handheld communicators and video calls from the sci-fi from the 1950s and 60s can exist in our present, why not mind uploading to computers in the future? Well, I don't think it's going to happen. At least not mind uploading to a computer where an individual person continues to exist in a computer brain. I'd say at best the technology might be able to copy a person's personality to a computer, but it wouldn't actually be the original person. I'll talk a little more about that later, but I want to say here that it's interesting to me that people find the idea of machines becoming conscious or sentient so fascinating. For one, much of the fiction about it, like the Terminator franchise and Skynet, for example, paints it very negatively. So it's not like it's always portrayed in a positive light. But it's all the more relevant to me because a man and a woman can get together and create a conscious being without any special tools or knowledge. What's the big deal about a machine becoming conscious? Is creating a conscious being in a highly technical, overcomplicated way supposed to be some kind of big achievement? People have been creating new conscious beings since the dawn of time. I wouldn't be impressed with a machine becoming conscious, but I'm also not expecting it to happen. An AI that seems intelligent and can respond in a human-like manner and maybe even say it is sentient probably still isn't really sentient. Ultimately, at its core, it's still just code that someone coded. It's programmed to behave in a certain way, it may be programmed to learn, and may be able to adjust and adapt its behaviors based on what it has learned, but it's still just doing what it's programmed to do. I don't really think it's conscious, even if it can act like it is conscious. But I guess it's all in how you define consciousness. What do you think it is? Is acting conscious enough to be conscious? Or is it something more than that, even if you can't quite put your finger on what it is? It occurred to me that this idea of mind uploading is popular with people with an atheistic or materialistic mindset because they think this physical world is all there is. They are just biological robots, and when they die, they are just gone. So they want to try to find a way to become immortal by transferring their minds into a computerized digital brain. They think if they're just biological robots, if they could figure out how the brain worked, they can just copy that into something digital and keep their mind going perpetually in some kind of computer brain, or a positronic brain, as it's called in Star Trek. I think this is why metaverses have become so popular recently. It's potentially a place for a digital mind to go. Imagine not living in the Matrix, but wanting to live in it. I think they really think their consciousness is generated only by the brain, so they think it's possible to eventually move that generative process onto a computer, and they will be able to become immortal that way. But I don't think it works that way. They can't really transfer their consciousness to a computer. At best, they would only be able to create a copy of themselves on a computer. Maybe if the technology was advanced enough, the computer copy of their mind could think and act like they would think and act, but it would still just be a copy of their mind, not their real mind. But I think it's unlikely a computer could actually portray a fully accurate version of the real person. Maybe it would come close, but I feel limitations in programming would make it so the computer copy of a person wouldn't be able to get everything right all of the time. It wouldn't necessarily react to things in the exact same way the real person would have reacted to things in all situations all of the time. That's just what I think about the limitations of computer programming. I guess I'm not as optimistic about the potential of mind-uploading technology as some people are, but I don't think the ultimate goal of these transhumanists is just to create digital copies of themselves. I think they want to continue existing in an immortal form, and I think that since they think only the brain is what generates consciousness, that eventually they can create a computer that their own individual consciousness can move on to. But I don't think it would really be them. In the Netflix show Altered Carbon, people can not only be spun back up from a chip into a new body, but some people actually have backup copies of themselves. So if they die unexpectedly, they can be brought back from a backup copy. It's silly to me because would a backup copy of a person really be the same person? Wouldn't the backup copy just be a different person who happens to have the same memory and personality as the person was when the backup was made? With that in mind, the original human person has long been gone, with only a copy of themselves with their personality and memories continuing on after them, and in some cases later copies of that first copy. So in that story, it's not really the original person continuing to exist, just copies of people. But if that's all there is, why bother? Why continually just make copies of the same people? It just seems silly to me. So anyway, what is consciousness? Well, I can't tell you exactly how consciousness works because I'm not entirely sure how it works myself, but I don't have to know how it works to know how it doesn't work. Consciousness as we know it is difficult to locate. In mainstream science and academia, it is generally thought consciousness is created by the brain because they think we live in an entirely measurable material world and are just biological robots, so therefore, that must be where consciousness is. Where else would it be? Perhaps it does reside in the brain, but maybe it isn't limited to the brain. There are many stories of people having out-of-body experiences from the distant past to the modern day. It's common with people who have had near-death experiences, but there are also other people who have experienced it while meditating or maybe with the use of certain psychedelic drugs. And it's easy to say these are just dreams or hallucinations, but even pilots flying planes have had out-of-body experiences where they feel like they're sitting on the wing of the plane and seeing themselves in the cockpit. They aren't even trying to have an out-of-body experience. So is it really all hallucinations, though? How is it that some people are able to remember things or see or hear things they couldn't have seen or heard with their eyes and ears while they were meditating or having a near-death experiences, and what they remember can later be confirmed to be true? Some out-of-body experiences might be hallucinations, but not all of them can be explained away so simply. With that in mind, it seems that while consciousness may reside in the brain, it can also function outside of the brain. So even though I can't tell you for sure how consciousness works, I can tell you what I think here. I think consciousness is in the soul, which I think is within your body, may also be around your body, like what some people call an aura. Some people claim to be able to see auras, and I'm not sure if that's true or not, but most people don't see auras. It's kind of like the wind or Wi-Fi. You know it's there, even though you can't see it. And so you might say, but we can see the effect of the wind and on the trees and feel it against our bodies, and we see the Wi-Fi working on our computers. Can you measure the soul in some way? I'm not sure if you can measure it per se, but I think the energy in the body, the electrical impulses in the brain flowing through the body, may be some evidence of it. I think consciousness is more than just a phenomenon of the brain. The brain is just something consciousness uses to control the body. The brain is kind of like a video game controller for the body. The food you eat is like the batteries for the controller. The consciousness of the soul is what pushes the buttons on the controller. The energy generated by the food you eat isn't the only energy in the body. I I think there is also a soul energy in and around the body animating it. And that's what I don't think could be copied by a computer. They might eventually be able to copy the controller and the game and the avatar, but not the person playing the game. At best, I think the copy would be like one of those AI-controlled cars in a racing game that tries to race like a real player it has gathered data on. The car might drive like the real player does, but it isn't really the real player. Although I'm skeptical that a computer brain could be built to transfer a true consciousness to, I think if it were ever going to be possible to build a computer brain, it would have to be built with the understanding that there is more to a person's mind than just a brain. Those are my thoughts on that. Thanks for listening.